Our attention has always been limited, valuable, and scarce. But even more so now with the dominance of the internet and social media. Global content consumption more than doubled in 2020, but the average human attention span is now 8 seconds long, which means that brands have a new battle, not just grabbing consumer attention, but more importantly, retaining it. The volume at which consumers are being fed content has changed behaviors and brands must adapt. And fast. The percentage of ads considered fully viewed with high attention has decreased from 97% in the early 90s to less than 20% today. How do you cut through the clutter? How do you master the game of eyeballs and clicks? The answer is high quality content and strategic distribution. Consumers want content that is gripping, valuable, engaging, interactive, and has a clear and compelling message. They want to laugh, cry, be surprised, and go on a journey with the brand. So how are you going to grab consumer attention and compete on social media timelines? The conversation starts now.
A very good morning to you and yours, wherever you're joining us from this morning. Thank you so much for making the time to join us once again for the Future of Media Digitized series. We really appreciate the fact that you've taken time out of your day to learn with us, to ask the right questions, to hopefully learn from our panelists as well. I'm really looking forward to this one. Welcome to another one of these. If this is your first time, my goodness, have you missed out? But regardless, we'll still welcome you into the clan here. This morning, we are discussing fighting through the fog. It's quite the golden question that we'll be unpacking with our panelists this morning. We're looking at consumer attention as a scarce commodity. I know wherever you are within the media industry, communications overall, marketing, advertising, I'm sure whether you ask yourself, whether you are in boardrooms where this is asked, whether you are creating strategies where you're trying to combat and figure this out, there's so much to unpack around attention and your consumer's attention. You know, how do you exactly get to figuring all of this out? Well, hopefully by the end of the session, you will have figured, a step closer to coming up with a solution. My name is Sia Sangweni. I am Cliff Central's brand manager and also a show host there. And I have the absolute privilege, the honor, and the pleasure, absolute sheer pleasure of being your moderator this morning. I'm so excited to get introducing our panelists. But before then, just to set some context to everything, we really do want to have a wholesome and fantastic conversation this morning. So we do want to hear from you wherever you are. Please do engage with us, and especially on this topic, as we find out specifically what your thoughts are when we talk about building a brand, boosting the brand, and also retaining and keeping the attention of the audience of that brand. What are your thoughts on that? How, in your opinion, does a brand build, boost, and bag the attention of an audience in today's world? Please let us know by engaging with us on the poll. You can let us know whether it's social media, whether it's video, whether it's out of home. Please share that with us and we'll be involving and incorporating that into the conversation. So we know, but to set the scene further, 2021 has really been more about answers than questions. We know what 2020 has done for us in our industry particularly, but the world over. And it seems like an almost near impossible situation to navigate these times, but hopefully conversations like these are what assist us in moving this conversation and our industry forward. And so that's exactly why we settled on this form of an online series, and particularly this morning's conversation. Apologies for that slight glitch. I think we should be back on now. So as we talk about attention being a source and a person only has so much of it, how do we divide it amongst our industry? So that's what we'll be discussing this morning. And without wasting any time, let's go into introducing our panel. People who'll be really the brains in this conversation. I'm merely here to pick their brains as well. So first up is Isla Prentice. She is the intelligence lead at Terasana Consulting within the Media Shop. Good morning, Isla.
Morning, Sia.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And then we also have Scarce Coleman, who is the Market Engagement Manager at Kagiso Media Radio. Good morning, Scarce. How are you?
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic stuff. We also have Kendall Zogby, the Head of Communication Strategy at Yellowwood. How are you, Kendall?
Hey, Thea. Hi, everybody. I'm good.
Great
Excited
to have
be
you here this morning. Great to have you here this morning. And then I feel very close and implored to introduce our final panelists, because I was told we got a little side eye when myself and our panelists jumped on, because it was an all-female crew up until we jumped on. Good morning, Danny Druin, who is the creative director at Wonderman Thompson. How are you, Danny?
Morning, Sia. Yeah, I'm well, dude. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you know what? Now even Danny calls me dude. I feel like we have a bit of an alliance here. But ladies, thank you for having us in your space, regardless. I want to get straight into the conversation. There's so much to unpack within the next hour. And so I want to start with you, Kendall. There's been so much change over the past few months and a little over a year. So in your opinion, what has been one of the hardest challenges you have faced with the shift in consumer attention and behavior during this pandemic?
Sia, I think at first one of the biggest challenges we faced at Yellowwood and just in general was getting people to realize how permanent this change really is, how consumer behavior, kind of consumer journeys are going to be forever changed because of COVID. And so while that was a challenge at first, it's quite exciting to be at ground zero and sort of have to reimagine and rethink how people are consuming content, what brands they're buying into, what their consumption habits are in the home space. Was a really exciting place, I think, to be. But the challenge really, I think, from a strategic point of view, is everything we thought we knew is kind of gone. And so when it comes to research, when it comes to insights, when it comes to honing in on like the deep kind of meaningful nuanced moments where we can capture audiences' attention, it's a whole new world and a whole new ball game. So I think it's kept us on our toes. We've had to do very quick step changes and get our clients, get our colleagues, and get everybody into a new way of kind of rigorously thinking about what these new consumption behaviors are, how we're going to target consumers differently, and how that's been a revolutionary change from what we've done before. So I think the challenge was the mindset shift, really, if that makes sense.
My goodness, at least you have quite an optimistic approach and attitude, and I'm certain that is what a lot of us need to adapt more of if we don't have it. Scarce, I want to find out from your perspective then, when we talk about the attention of an audience right now in this day and age, what is your interpretation of attention economics?
Thanks, Sia. So if you think about in 2020 that a 9-year-old made 29 million from his YouTube channel reviewing toys. I'm sure you guys have heard about Ryan, the toy reviewer. Or that Netflix had 207 million paid subscribers worldwide as of the first quarter of 2021. Or that last year that the average internet user spent 2 hours daily on social media. And that this year it's predicted that it would be 3 hours. So the government listing businesses, brands, and people who have figured out that attention is not only a valuable resource, but it's also a currency, and that attention economy that has turned humans into products to be bought and sold. When we think of attention economics, brands must entice users to volunteer their attention and spend money. So it's also one of the most valuable resources of the digital age. The average attention span for humans is 8 seconds. But in those 8 seconds, we've got brands fighting for your attention. The digital products are competing for users' limited attention. The modern economy evolves around the human attention span and how products capture the attention. If you think about publishers, we're using eye-catching animation. We've got the call to action on our content. Our sites are sending out frequent notifications with the goal of boosting engagement. Social networking sites are fueling the attention economy with number of users using the sites every day. The dynamics of attention economy incentivize companies to draw users in to spend more and more time on apps. So just yesterday, I spent 11 minutes watching a woman eating a giant crab. That video, by the way, has had 8 million views on it. But there is a negative side to all of this. The negative side is that there is an abundance of information out there. And because of that, businesses are fighting for our attention. Netflix said last year that they had two big competitors, YouTube and our sleep. When we want to, or when we want, whether we want to or not, we're participating in the attention economy every day. Every time you pick up your phone, turn on a screen, or open an app, you are for sale. We're using technology that's designed to be addictive. Your phone has features that were designed specifically to keep you actively engaged. Think about the infinite scroll on Facebook and Instagram, or the automatic sound on YouTube. They're all designed to increase the likelihood of keeping our attention once we're in. I mean, news headlines are not designed to inform us. They're actually designed to get us to click. So the attention economy impacts on our time, our mental health, and the way we communicate.
Oh my goodness. Well, let me tell you, it's you and what you've just said, and also my phone at the end of every week when a screen report pops up.
When it tells you spend 2 to 3 hours and you're like, oh my word, I wish I just didn't do it so much.
I get exactly what you mean. I get exactly what you mean. This is going to become a support group then for us to lament about this. Isla, so with what Scarce has said, and I'm sure a lot of people who are decision makers within their organizations are pushed for objectives or pushed to push for more. But when is less actually more and more beneficial when it comes to attention?
I think it's such an important question to ask here. And I think it's not really about whether it's less or more, but it's about finding the right kind of attention. So making sure that we cut through that clutter. So, Kendall's already taken us through how we're living in this completely different world compared to this time this time just over a year ago. I can no longer say this time last year because we were already in it this time last year. And Scarce has explained, the 8-second attention span. I remember reading something similar, but actually they say a digital user has 3 to 5 seconds to get their attention. So actually less is more in that we've got less time to get somebody's attention. And it's really important that we capture the audience in that 3 to 5 seconds to pull someone in. And actually, the shift is no longer in advertisers' control. It's not about what we want to tell consumers. It's what consumers want to find out. So how do you use that attention span to pull somebody in? Because then once you become part of what they want to consume, that's when you can really build a relationship with the consumer. So that's really, it's about how do we use less attention to get their attention or to get them into our world. And then we can have more engagement, more relationship, etc. But it is making sure that we get that balance because it's not always possible. And you are fighting so much. Like who hasn't been on a digital detox? That screen time is something I'm actually capturing daily in order to reduce, because we do just get sucked into this whirlwind of data. And how do we break through that?
Yeah. Danny, I'm sorry if this is the golden question that is worth a lot to first throw at you, but how do you then come up with interesting and relatable content that makes that impact that you wanted to make?
So yeah, that is indeed the gazillion-dollar question. If you can find some definitive answer to that, let's chat. But look, I think to the points made earlier around attention spans, they say human attention is at 8-9 seconds. Digital users' attention is at 3.5 seconds. A goldfish's attention is at 8 seconds. So it kind of does beg the question of, how does content cut through when there's around 4.5 billion pieces being produced every day? And I would say that my number one rule is to keep it consumer centric. I think it's really important not to get suckered into this mindset of putting the client or a business first. I would even argue to say that as agency partners, our job is to constantly remind the client that what they're doing is for somebody out there, not for their business. That's the first place you win. And in Adland, I think we tend to wear a lot of hats. You wear the creative hat, you wear the client hat, you wear the media hat, you wear the strat hat, the tech hat, whatever. take off the hat and just remember to be a person first. And I think garnering a little bit of objectivity in that way and really stress testing your work against, is this something that as a human being would like to consume? That is always a really good place to start with your gut instinct. There's a quote I really love, which is, if you're going to crash the party, bring champagne. And it's important to remember that a lot of ads are interrupting what somebody is interested in. So, it's really important to ground a strategy that finds a shared value between what the business needs to accomplish and what the consumer cares about, and make sure that the people actually making the content buy into that in a very real way. Additional to that, I'd say that, there are well-documented and kind of data-proven ways to make content count. There's various basics that any platform will tell you around design best practice, messaging best practice, how to use sound, etc. So those are also really important to adhere to. But I'd also say, on the opposite side of the basic scale, aim for the extreme, the weird, the exceptional. Nobody looks at a pigeon, but they will if it's wearing a bikini. And I kind of feel like we're pre-programmed as human beings to spot the stuff that stands out as unusual and strange. So I think in order to make content that kind of counts, you've got to make yourself stand out, and you kind of need to stay brave enough to try new things, but humble enough to learn from them when they do, whether they do or don't work. So that is my kind of strange answer to your question.
Because Danny, I have to admit, I was on the way to making notes around what you were saying. The champagne answer, I could get that. Pigeon wearing a bikini, not a vision I wanted to have this early in the morning, or ever, really.
But you'd look, right? You'd look at the pigeon, wouldn't you?
I get your point. Thank you. Point made. Kendall, is similar to what I just asked Danny then. If you could give someone one piece of advice to help them when it comes to getting the attention of their target audience, what would it be?
I think Danny's just given the best segue into this, which is that it's always about the person, not a user, not a consumer, but an actual human being. And I think, like, as strategists particularly, sorry, my office is quite excited about something. As strategists particularly, I believe we should always champion the human, the person, the end kind of receiver of content. And if you do that, you're always kind of going to be on track. And I think when you think about these, like 8 seconds, 3 seconds, this limited time, I will spend 20 minutes watching a guy marvel over a rainbow, or eat an extra large crab, or get lost in a piece of kind of really great content that's helping me on a project that I'm working with. And that's because that content, that piece of advertising was created with me in mind, not with the brand, not with objectives, but with the audience in mind. And if you put the audience first, authentically and truly, I think that's probably the one piece of advice that I could give.
Got it. And I just have received a message from someone at your office right now who said, apologies for the noise in the background, but there was actually a pigeon that flew in wearing a bikini.
A pigeon came from Wonderman Thompson straight to our building. I love it.
Exactly. Caris, with your perspective and in your role, how are you wading through the battle of attention?
So I love hearing words like authentic and using data for stuff, because at East Coast Radio and Jacaranda, the brands that I'm working with, we use data, and we use that to build real connections with our audience. We've invested in a number of data tools to help guide the content strategy on air and online. We're using our insights.
Caris,
Sorry, yes. Karen?
No. As you were.
So obviously we're using the insights to influence the events we're putting out, as well as the insights to help our clients build successful campaigns with their target market. And we're helping them engage in authentic ways with them. We have invested in data management platforms. We're using WhatsApp bots, SMSs, remarketing, using all the insights that we can about the audience, about our loyal listeners, and turning them into brand ambassadors. So for us, it's very important that we do data mining and we really, really understand who's engaging with our content, and not just giving them what we think they want.
Mhm. Isla, with what you do, what are some of the vital steps that you use when you're trying to capture the right type of attention? Because I think it was Danny earlier as well who was alluding to it's very easy to get caught up in the, yeah, let's just fight for any sort of attention. But what are the vital steps to capture the right type of attention?
I think, Sia, there's so many different options. I could sit here and rattle a list off to you, but there's different options and all of them have pros and cons. It is about like assessing your situation and finding the right one. But every single one of those options have one starting point. And I'm going to build on what Danny and Kendall have already spoken about, is it's all about starting with that human being, that consumer that is first a human being before they're an audience or a consumer. And there's a quote that I think a lot of you have probably heard me say because I completely use and abuse it. It's an anonymous quote and it says, not many people, or many people know me, but not many people understand me. And I think that's so critical because we have all of this knowledge, we have all of this data. Knowledge is easy, especially in the year 2021. But understanding is a lot more difficult. So we really have to start with understanding the human being that is going to is that we are going to pull into our brand's world. And by doing that, that's how we can make sure we get the right attention, by tapping into what that person already knows, what they love. Because at the end of the day, we have no control. They're 100% in the driver's seat.
I hear you. Danny, with so many brands in this day and age, quite hypersensitive, aware, and even in some instances, very nervous about navigating the world of social media. In this difficult context, how was your strategy influenced and changed when it comes to what you do with social media?
It's a super relevant question, and I'd say that it's almost a work in progress because things are changing very quickly still. However, I would say that the biggest strategic change that I've noticed first came internally. So I think in a changed working environment, particularly when you're speaking about content, when you're speaking about creativity, retaining that sense of collaboration and retaining meaningful interpersonal relationships within a company has been really, really something that we've taken on seriously to ensure that we can, as a company, uphold the values of things like consumer centricity, of things like, making sure that we're not doing stuff just because we think we should, and making sure that we're really, really interrogating our work a lot, given the different context that we're making it in. But then, to look more closely at social media, which is obviously the ask of this particular question, I'd say that it's become really important to exceed the content mindset. I think a lot of brands are stuck on the always on hamster wheel of like, we need to pump out X amount of content every month because that's just what we've always done. At the same time, though, I think those brands, and I mean, it's an exercise that we're doing ongoingly in our agency is asking around what is the actual consumer experience integrated across touch points. How does somebody experience this brand, and where does social media fit into that, instead of just looking at it as a platform in isolation, because that is not how a consumer will experience any brand. So, we've been forced to really interrogate what human needs our content is solving. We use a system called content currencies, which, we force ourselves to I don't want to say box check, but stress test our work against. So is this something that is educating somebody? Is it something of utility? Is it something of inspiration? And making sure that we can always put language to why this thing deserves to exist. So yeah, I think that from a strategic perspective has been a big focus for us.
Got it. Kendall, with some of your experience when it comes to content creation, the likes of thought leadership articles and editorial articles, are those things that brands can look at using to boost their messages when it comes to capturing attention?
Yes, definitely. If you're telling people something they didn't know before. So, I mean, we've spoken about how cluttered the world is with information. And so if you can tell your audience something they didn't know, or tell them something in a unique and interesting way, it can be really powerful. And that sounds simple, but in a world that's filled with so many sources of information, It's a really hard thing to do, to tell people something that they didn't know before, or position it or bring it to them in a way that they've never seen it. And I think when you start to do that, you start to build a reputation for your brand as someone who plays in the thought leadership space, as somebody who sets themselves apart from just adding to the clutter, but bringing insight, because insight really is the connection of all those dots. It really is where you start taking all the noise and all the data and all of this and start bringing a really crystallized, unique view to your consumers that gives them that moment of, I never saw it like that, or I didn't think of it that way, or I've never seen that before. And then I think that thought leadership can be really powerful for brands, yeah.
I like that definition. I really do. Insight is the connection of all of those dots. That's a good way to look at it. But I also think, and this is my question to you, Karis, when it comes to talking about attention, one has to examine the value they're bringing to a consumer or an audience just in terms of their brand. So with what you do at Kagiso Media Radio, what would you say is the value or the meaning of your brand to your audience?
Well, I mean, we radio, so we create connections, community connections, connections for brands, connections through music, connections through content with the presenters, connections through our social media. We are connecting business, and we do it really, really well.
Got you. Ayla, here's a question from the audience that I think would be one that you could answer. Someone would like to know, does image capture more attention as compared to information? What have you found?
I think it really does depend on the situation. I think the important thing is there is absolutely no one size fits all. I think Danny said it in his first question, like, if you can give me a list of rules of what works, it's great. And Kendall again said, like, is it new? Is it interesting? You know, what content we put out there. And remember, everything, an ad, a TV show, it's all fighting for the same attention, and it's all considered content. And if it's just adding more to the same clutter and you're just going to become bland, that's not going to help. So, you know, imagery certainly does play a role, but what role that plays depends on what you're trying to do. Educational information is very difficult to convey through an image. So it really is about understanding, what are you trying to do? What are all your options? And then, like Kendall said, how do you join all those dots and really write that strategy to put together for the brand?
Yeah. Danny, another audience question geared towards you. Someone wants to know, what are great local examples of brands that have successfully fought through the fog? And what do you think was the driver of their success?
Yikes. Okay, well, I'd say that, you know, there are the household names who always fight through the fog, right? So the one that obviously comes to mind is like the likes of a Nando's, who has found a real pocket in society of people who love their brand, and in tandem with that, they have a very specific way of staying relevant, and they tend to rear their heads in a way that feels consistent, but every time sort of fresh. And I think it's the brands that have managed to do that that have really succeeded. So in terms of capturing attention from a strategic or tactical point of view, I would say a brand like Nando's does it really well. But then also at the same time, so we do a weekly roundup of what's performing really well in the past week on social platforms in terms of what's capturing people's attention. And I'm constantly amazed to find that Krispy Kreme comes out tops, like, so more weeks than you would expect. And they've got a way of being very platform relevant in terms of the way that they put their visuals together and they give people stuff, right? So their engagement is often rewarded with a surprise and delight, or driven by competition. There's a whole different conversation, as you mentioned, around, is that the right attention? Is that the attention you actually want or not? However, like it or not, people are looking at that work. So I'd say that those are two pretty good local examples that are really, you know, doing the most to capture attention at the moment.
Yeah. Listen, Danny, Krispy Kreme definitely gives people stuff. They give me the motivation to get up and go to gym after I've devoured a whole dozen. Just because they're delicious, it's not their fault, it's all mine. So they've given me the motivation.
That's on you, man.
Yeah. That's all that matters, true. Kendall, with considering what Danny has now spoken about, what would you say to brands when it comes to being able to set themselves apart when it comes to their content, set themselves apart from the rest?
There's a lot of ways in to do that, right? But I think one of them can be go to where they are, right? Rather than forcing them to come to where you are as a brand. And so I think and this involves thinking about how much, and it goes back to the first question, right? How much consumption behavior has changed. But you can find really interesting ways in to find your audience where they are. Is that a place like Clubhouse? Is that something like Spotify doing a playlist for workouts during the pandemic? Or I saw a pasta brand, I think it's Barilla, doing Spotify playlists at the exact length of how long it takes to cook your pasta. Like, now I'm interested, right? And that's, I think, a way in for brands to stand apart, is to start trying to find your consumers where they are rather than forcing them to come to you. And I think, like, a brand, talking about brands who've managed to cut through the clutter, like to Danny's point, I think Savannah, very interestingly, over the last year, in a time where alcohol has seen huge up and downs, they've managed to really win with the youth, right? And it's so interesting how they've found ways to capture attention, to bring content, to pivot what they do in interesting ways in a kind of new age where their product is under siege, and like 1 minute we can have it, 1 minute we can't. So for me, Savannah was a brand that really stood out over the last period. But yeah, if it's about if you want to find ways to stand out, that's one of them. Go to where your audience is, right?
Karis, you know, at the end of the day, a business still is a business and has very key objectives. And, you know, there might be, for example, marketing. There still needs to be a bottom line around this. So when we're looking at content marketing specifically, how would you advise or suggest brands scale up content marketing without losing the quality of what they're doing and still going ahead with the objective of capturing and retaining that attention with their audience?
Well, we know that if you want to grab attention, you need to do attractive content. So if I think about, like, with East Coast and Jacaranda, we do sticky content really, really well. We'll take a trending topic, we'll turn it into our own piece of content. We'll make it go from being an article to a video to an image to a social post. So it's finding those little moments, those little content opportunities, and expanding them, but staying true to your brand messaging. We also look at gamifications, one of our secret weapons as well. So from like polls and quizzes, you can use that to engage with your audience, engage with the consumers out there. I mean, they're going to share this stuff and get more people to see your brand messaging. And then they'll convert them obviously back to being your listeners or to your audience, your target market funding.
Isla, then this is quite, let's talk about the opposite side of the scale. When things fall flat or when things don't work as well as we would have liked them to. How do you differentiate between, or rather, how do you find the balance between an intrusive irritation to becoming a valued message? What's the difference there?
I think it's so important, and I think your answers in your question, and it's all about that balance. So, you know, we also can't neglect like marketing science principles. We know that we need to find consumers at mass reach, at mass scale. We know that we need to be continuously in their lives because you never know when someone is in the market, and that we can't predict purchase behavior. So it is about getting that balance right and remembering that every piece of communication that you put out there is content. So that's why we also say that the most variable is always going to be your creative. It's always going to be your message. And getting that message is so critical because you can put all the plans together. You can hit every note right in terms of what Kendall alluded to earlier, in terms of finding your audience. But if your messaging is going to irritate that consumer, they're going to choose to turn off. And if they can't turn off, they're going to start to get irritated. So it is about making sure that all the parties are working together, that we're making sure that we're reaching them, that we're connecting with them at different levels. Remember, yes, we're talking a lot about engagement, but awareness has not died. Awareness is still equally important. So how do we get all of those levels right and get the right message out there? And I think that's where brands really need to understand their consumers once again, to make sure that they're connecting with that audience at mass scale, using human truths in small communities, using bespoke insights, and getting that balance right across everything.
Right. So the key there is balance. Sometimes you just need a pigeon in a ball gown, not necessarily a pigeon in a bikini. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Balancing on some high heels, maybe.
Thank you. Danny, I do hope you know that we will never let that down around these parts. But here's a question to you, Danny. What are the new digital content formats that you are currently seeing emerge?
I feel like I'm never going to live that example down. Thank you very much, Sia. So, look, I think format's an interesting question. I think it would arguably go hand in hand with a platform question. I think as tech evolves, as consumer interests evolve, the formats evolve with it. So, whether it's stuff like AR, whether it's more environmental stuff like esports and gaming platforms, I think, the way audio is used, for example, in more private spaces like Clubhouse, these can all attest to the evolution of formats. However, I think potentially the more interesting question is around the evolution of platforms. I think platforms have always acted as a kind of a mirror to society, a kind of zeitgeist of types. If you think back to the world of MySpace and Mixit, all the way forward to now where we are kind of with TikTok and Clubhouse, there has been an interesting evolution. And I think for me, what's interesting about the evolution of formats and platforms is the fact that they are being held increasingly accountable for their net effect on things like democracy, on mental health, on all these sorts of things. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I still think that they are designed to be, as Scarce mentioned, they're designed to be addictive, potentially destructive, and they're not being sufficiently held to task. However, I kind of feel like, again, the democratized nature of social media hopefully starts to see some more power put in the hands of the users. And I think there's evidence of this. So, for example, Instagram hiding its likes, that experiment, or ultimately, Reddit and Twitter creating more conversational safe spaces for people. Seeing these kinds of things does make me cautiously optimistic about, maybe platforms can start to become more ethical, and with them, and with that, obviously, an increased propensity for a net positive effect.
Mm-hmm. I want to throw this question to you, Kendall, and also anyone in an agency role as well. This is from one of our viewers today who would like to know, how are you handling that balance between clients and brands expecting more with less in your role as an agency?
Tough question. And it's a daily balancing act, right? I think that good creativity in the right place doesn't always need lots of money. And I think that if we, as like more and more brands start to have access to data, to information, as we get sharper on planning and our comms planning, it all really comes down to impactful, breakthrough, powerful creative. Like that really is like at the center of everything we do, specifically if we're talking agency side. But balancing wanting more for less or with less, it's a tough balancing act, right? And as competition gets steeper, as attention is scarcer, it is a hard one to overcome. But I think all we can do is really find those smart ends, those clever ways, those insightful twists on an old idea, on a new idea, to try bring it to market in an interesting way that can maximize a client's budget. I think it's important, but I will say it's a daily balancing act that kind of keeps us on our toes. I don't know what any of the other panelists have got to say.
Yeah, anyone else would like to add to that?
I'll add something, Sia. I think it's again, so it's such an interesting one, because I think also as agencies, we are paid by clients to also have real conversations with them. And I think when you're trying to get more for less, making sure I don't say it the wrong way around. When you're trying to get more for less, a lot of it is also about letting go of control. So, you can't always control the environment that you're in. So how do you pull the consumer in and get the consumer involved that you can extend a campaign? But like I said, that is about letting go of control. So I think when it goes wrong is when a client is trying to control all of the pieces and still ask for more for less. But when you can let go of control, whether it be creative control or whether you get the consumer involved or trying something without knowing what the results are going to be. How many times have we heard like, I want innovation, I want to do something new, but can you show me that it's worked? Actually, no, there is some risk involved, and with this big risk comes big rewards. So how do we let go of control, and how do we have those conversations with clients to push them into that space?
Right.
I think that's so true, Isla. Like, when it comes to getting more for less, it is often about doing a brave thing, right? It's about stepping outside of what feels comfortable or what's been done or how traditionally you might bring a campaign or a piece of content to market. And if you're going to do a brave thing, you've got to be willing to let go of a little bit of control as a client. It's very true.
So we talk about being brave, we talk about being out there for a brand, but Karis, what about sometimes when it's a bit of a slow news day or a slow news week? How do you still keep surprising and engaging the customer? How do you be on it and, capture their attention?
Well, I mean, if anything that we've learned from COVID is to be agile and to adapt, right? So let me give you 2 examples from East Coast and Jacaranda. Last year, we did a bit of a content survey. And obviously, no events were banned with the lockdowns. So then we went virtual. But this virtual music event was a major experience for our audience. We had people international watching. We had locals watching. We raised money as part of our Good Morning Angels campaign. East Coast Radio had a birthday in October. They went on air with their campaign and online with their campaign. They created engaging opportunities on social and on the website for this. So what is a big focus then is that you need to understand the new normal is changed in the future. So good content, good experience, and that's the key to driving, obviously, engagement. It's the key to keeping people in your platforms and engaging with you all the time.
Mm-hmm. You make it sound so simple.
It is actually. So there's no formula as such. Obviously, as I said, you always look at your data, your insights, you mine this properly, you understand that audience with it. And then you can take a simple topic, I mean, like the woman eating this crab, that people have watched it, it's out there, it's old content. But then you bring it back into the stations, you bring it back into your audience, you find a way for them to say, oh, maybe if we challenge the audience to eat their own crabs and creating us videos, So it's finding what gets them to want to do something else with your brand.
Let me say, this woman eating a crab has clearly made an impression on you. You have referenced it at least 4 times this morning. Goodness.
Can tell you how it sticks in the mind, eh?
Clearly, it has captured your attention, so we can definitely learn from that. Anna, here's another question from one of our viewers directed to you. They say, attention as a currency for media buying is proposed by Lumen Research. So what are your views on this, rather than looking at, CPMs?
It's very interesting. And once again, I'm going to come back to that word of balance. So I think with anything, it's not about replacing, but it's adding to. So I'm a big fan of looking at, attention as a currency, but it's not instead of, it's as well as. So I don't know why we live in a world where we've always got to pick one lane. Why can't we merge those lanes and build a new scenario? Why do we have to try find one answer that suits everybody? But again, coming back to those needs and looking what is the right thing for this client, for this brand, and how do we make sure that we have all of these pieces? We have so much available to us. How do we take all of those pieces and put it together into one puzzle that's right for the client? So big fan, but not a one size fits all, and not instead of.
Mm-hmm. Question for Danny from our audience. Someone would like to know, in your opinion, does boosting posts on Facebook yield increased results as opposed to using Facebook adverts?
I guess from a performance perspective, Boosting versus ad units is like an ongoing conversation. In my view, at least, I kind of feel like it depends what you're aiming for. So, for example, if you're trying to reach more people, you're ultimately going to be able to wile your way into that objective by putting money behind it. And I know we have media specialists in my midst, so feel free to jump in. But as far as I understand, when you're looking at things that you can buy, such as reach, it's likely better to begin with the ad unit in mind, because that is optimized to actually achieve your objective. However, when you start to talk about engagements and the quality of engagements and all that sort of stuff, I kind of feel like the buying question isn't necessarily as important. Then it becomes a content quality question.
Mm-hmm. Would anyone like to add in on that?
I'd love to jump in there. So, because we run a lot of the ads to get our content seen a bit more. And what we've picked up that if you boost, our boost it's a terrible word, it's a bad word in our company. So if you boost, all you're doing is you're just getting the same people on that page just to see that content. But the minute you go into the ad manager, you're actually expanding on your reach. You can do a conversions from this. You can obviously do the awareness from this. So it gives you more impact, and there's a bigger audience for you to target better. If you're going to target through boosting, again, it's just that audience of yours, and you're missing that opportunity to find this audience.
I hear you. Going to you, Kendall, we've discussed attention, we've discussed how to be creative, but this all will still have to be incorporated into a campaign, into what we have to do for a client, for example. So to you, what would your advice be when it comes to delivering, despite, or rather including everything that we've discussed so far this morning, into an effective campaign?
Yeah, that's what it all comes down to, right? So I think at Yellowwood, what we pride ourselves on is integration and the rigorous art of proper comms planning. So having incredible cut-through creative and then putting that in a desert where nobody sees it, we've wasted our time. But if we can integrate along the way for our comms planning to bring that creative to life in the most effective way, that's step one, I think, integration. Step two is often goes back to keeping that human being in mind, that being the champion for the person this is created for. And that talks to consumer journeys. And it's a word or a term that we throw around a lot, customer life cycles, customer journeys. Are we getting it right? Are we really considering the full spectrum of everything a consumer interacts with when they're seeing what they're seeing and finding the most effective ways to reach them? And I think that that's one of the ways to really champion consumer journeys and bring great ideas to life for effectiveness becomes about not just ticking a box. People change, consumption habits change, we're human beings. And so a lot of comms planning needs to be able to stretch and evolve and grow and think outside of the different boxes that creative people think outside of. So sometimes, you have in mind your touch points, your objectives, your whole campaign, and creatively there's an idea that is a lot more about impact than you had thought, or needs a step change in how you bring your comms to life for that. And that's why integration of strategy and creative becomes so important in finding that golden moment where it's brought to life impactfully and the creative is cut through. And yeah, it's a hard thing to achieve, but if you can integrate from the get-go, and if you can accept that it needs to be a living and an evolving view on consumer behavior and how to find them in those right moments, then I think you can start to win.
Yeah. Scarce, I mentioned this at the beginning of the session and said, it's somewhat buzzwords now, being agile and having to pivot and work on the fly. But more than just buzzwords, we've had to now adopt this and work this way in these times that we're living in. What has, let's say, the past year taught you about the way that you work? And what has it given you in terms of new guiding principles, in terms of how you will continue to work in the future when it comes to the attention of your audience and relating and communicating to them?
So it's about testing, so we test and we fail fast and we move on quickly. We don't hold on to this piece of content didn't work. Why didn't it work? We look for, okay, it hasn't worked. Let's change, changing either headlines, images, the visuals for it. Maybe it's the wrong platform that it's on. So what we've done for the past year and will continue to do is constantly test where we're putting our content, test how the engagement happens from this, test or the results that come out of it, the conversion that comes from it. And then, we build like little case studies around these. So these are our learning experiences. And then to use this, but also to remember that not everything we do will work for the next campaign or for the next client or the next content opportunity. And so it's an experience through every content item as well. And it's one of our things for us is that we test, we learn, we move on, we try a new formula, we test, we learn, and we go with it.
Those are good sentiments and great guiding principles. Thanks for that. Ida, when it comes to what you've learned over the past year and a bit and how to deal with change, in the midst of all of this as well, what does it mean for you to be creative?
I think I just love this question. For me, the first thing to note is that, like, if you look up like what it means to be creative, there are millions of definitions out there, and everybody has their own definition. And I think there's something quite poetic in that, and something quite creative in that. And I think for me, there's one simple answer to it, and it's about finding the unexpected solution. Because I think we so often, especially in our industry, assume creativity is for creatives, and actually creativity should sit in everybody's day-to-day life, never mind just their job function. So, for me, life is about always starting with a question and a challenge. Even when you don't know it, you're actually answering a question. And creativity is as simple as finding the unexpected solution, the solution that nobody expected, and creating that and bringing that to life.
Oh, man. Can I get you to record that again and just send to me as a voice note when Mondays are tough and I'm not cracking things? I just want to hear that. I'll meditate on exactly what you said. But moving to you, Danny, on a similar note around creativity, and I know a lot of people get easily wound up and frustrated. Where do you replenish your creativity well? What sparked your creativity and said, I definitely want to work in this world and be in this industry? How do you keep your creativity going?
So on the first question around kind of what sparked my love of creativity, and why I got into this line of work, my personal story doesn't come from like I saw a Coke ad or I saw a Nando's ad that I thought was so good and I wanted to make an ad like that. For me, the communications industry has always been more of a platform for me to express my creativity and imagination through, instead of really the source of those things. There are loads of brands that I love. In terms of staying inspired, the big awards shows are always really, really inspirational at looking at, what amazing things people are doing in our industry. The brands like, Coca-Cola, Skittles, Burger King, Adobe, these brands are doing amazing things that keep me, aiming higher and higher. But in terms of how I keep my creative well full, I would say that the importance of stepping away from the work cannot be understated. I think that a calm and relaxed mind will always think in more interesting directions than one that is working from brief to brief, weekend to weekend. So it's something that, from an organizational culture point of view, we try to drive really hard and make sure that there is some daylight between your work world and just being a person, because ultimately I'd say that creative inspiration, and it was, Isla mentioned it, creativity is not just for people who are creative. I think it's a natural part of who we are as people. But in order to keep that topped up, you need to do things that don't feel like you're working for them, and you just kind of walk away from them feeling replenished and energized in some way or another. So whether that's exercising, whether that's going to an art gallery, whether that's binging Netflix the whole weekend, all of these things to allow our minds to absorb new influence and see the world without the lens of work in it are essentially ways of replenishing creativity, I'd say.
Again, a great answer that I want to listen to when the going gets tough. Thank you for that, Danny. I want to throw this question out there to all four of you or whoever would like to answer. It's another question from our audience. Someone would like to know, what advice would you give to a media owner or an agency on how best to prepare to adjust their campaigns on the fly?
I'm keen on this. So, I mean, I would say just as my number one thing is play nice. I think that the more collaborative you can be with other agencies, with your clients, with consumers, that allows you a great degree of shared responsibility and an understanding of how the campaign ecosystem works. So making sure that it's not a linear process and is instead some kind of ecosystem or cyclical based process is a really nice way of making sure that everybody knows where everybody else is and what key parts of a project they have control over, so that when things need to change, it's not like suddenly, oh, now we have to form a new relationship or rekindle a fire with it. It's a matter of you've been working together, and the spirit of collaboration, I feel, can really help solve a lot of the agility problems that brands tend to face.
Got it. Thanks, Danny.
I would also say, that you should look at your insights, before just, I'm going to change because it's a feeling. Like, don't base your changes on feelings, base it on the insights. So if it's insights coming from the campaigns or insights from what the audience is doing or insights to how much foot traffic is happening, but that's what I would look at.
Awesome, thanks. As we wrap up, I'd like to just go around to each of you and just get your final word on today's topic and your last word of advice to people watching as they navigate these tricky times. Kendall, I'd like to start with you.
Ooh, as a strategist, I should be good at short, sharp summaries, right? I think maybe my last piece of advice really is just about authenticity. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the days of consumers mindlessly just consuming, especially ads, are gone. And the more a brand can forget about the standard ways to reach their audience and can be authentic to who you are as a brand and authentic to the humans you're trying to reach, I think that's the best starting place to come from, authenticity.
Awesome. Karis, your final word?
Well, mine is, don't be scared of technology. I mean, it's there, so let's embrace it. Let's go for the tools that are going to help us build good content, engaging content, and yes, authentic content to allow us to make those connections.
Isla, your final word?
I think mine is to use all of the intelligence that we have available to us, but let's not forget that we're all human at the end of the day. And then stop trying to predict the unpredictable. So I know that is the theme for the whole series, but we cannot predict the unpredictable, but let's start planning for the unpredictable and planning for the unexpected, because I think 2020 was a lesson of we don't know what life is to come. We don't know the future. We don't have a crystal ball, but let's be ready for it anyway.
And Danny, your final word?
I would say bravery is often rewarded, and whether that's through success or through learnings, I think making sure that you're brave in the work that you put out is really a key factor in every single piece of content and every single campaign you run. Making sure that you're not doing it for the purposes of just doing it. It's really important.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you so much to the four of you for giving us, your pearls of wisdom and your great insight and laughs along the way. We really appreciate it. It meant so much to pick your brains this morning. And thank you. We hope that you'll be able to just field our questions at random when we need that insight and motivation on a Monday. Do not forget my name, Isla, when I call you and say, listen, girl, it's tough out in these streets. But thank you so much. Isla Prentice, Intelligence Lead at Terasana Consulting within the Media Shop. A big thank you to Danny Duran, Creative Director at Wonderman Thompson Digital. A big thank you as well to Karis Coleman, Market Engagement Manager at Kagiso Media Radio. And last but definitely not least, thank you to Kendall Zogby, Head of Communication Strategy at Yellowwood. And again, a big thank you goes out to our partners, because an event like this would not be possible without them. So thank you so much to Vodacom, to Easy Ads, Prime Media Outdoor, The Media Shop, Tilt, WAN Earthra, The Red Zone, and The Media Online. Thank you for supporting this, and thank you so much for assisting us having these conversations that bode us well as we continue and move on forwards in the workplace and navigating these crazy, crazy times that are made all the more easier and better thanks to conversations like these. And lastly, thank you so much for joining us wherever you are watching us from. It means a lot so that you join us every single month as we unpack our themes and conversations. And so we hope you'll be able to join us again next month, the 2nd of June at 10 a.m. Please go on to Future of Media and look at that information as you look forward to what we'll be discussing next month. It's our next online event in the Future of Media Digitized series. We'll be looking at shaping a predictable future for the SA media industry. Once again, a very pertinent topic and a pertinent discussion point to unpack. We'll have great panelists who will be able to assist us in that conversation. From my side, Sia Sangweni, it has been an absolute delight to be with you this morning. Thank you so much. Keep the conversations going on wherever you are, in your workplaces, on social media, and let's make sure that we come out of this better on the other side. Have a good one.